Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to Hillyer and team. It has been the most wonderful experience, and I will miss it greatly. I feel like I moved in. I painted, I did the interview, I had my paintings, I shared myself, and it's been the easiest, enjoyable, and fun process. So, thank you. My name is Zhenya Parish. I'm a multidisciplinary artist, and in the last decade, I've been primarily focusing on abstract expressionism. And as I was getting ready, I was trying to maybe prepare. I'm like, how do you prepare for the art of letting go if it already went? So I'll do my best to explain my process and my philosophy and approach to the way I see, because it's not only art, it's also a philosophy that I adopted, not only through my paintings, but I also apply it on everyday basis in my life. But briefly, I am from Russia, and this is where I got my classical training. I love this intimate setting. Oh, and before anything, I'll speak briefly, and as organic, I'd like it to be more organic, and if we can have it more conversational. Anytime you're welcome to add, but wait for the microphone maybe, or not. It's art of letting go. And I would like to just treat it as a living room, and questions are welcome and encouraged. But briefly back to my classical training from the teenage art school. Then moving to United States, I spent 10 years in Kansas, where I finished my high school, and I pursued a bachelor's of fine art in oil painting, and I love oil paints. They're rich, I love the smell, I love the time that it takes, which is not what I'm practicing at the moment. And after Kansas, moving to DMV, particularly Arlington, that's where I reside. I also have a studio there now, but prior having a studio in Arlington, my apartment was my studio for some time till my baby boy came along. After he was born, that space was not available as a studio. And my studio became a portable studio. It was everything that could fit in my backpack. It was on-the-go studio, on-the-go art supplies, on-the-go expressions. Any moment that I had, I would pull it out, a sketchbook. It was always full of sketchbooks, little canvases, markers, paints, chalks, different way to express on a smaller scale. So I would use it in any given moment that I had, in the metro, in a coffee shop, after going back to work and between the breaks. So I maintain, because the shortage of the time and the desire to express, everything had to be expressed really quickly. And that's where abstract and expressionism came more conscious and subconscious of the moment. And then wanting the same desire to go back to larger scale. And I really enjoyed being in community, in being inspired by music, by people, by energies and trees. The inspiration was constantly drawing from everything that is around me. So I was wondering, how can I go further and do exactly that, but in a larger scale? This is when the idea of collaborations came along, collaborations with musical acts, different creative outlets, and I approached a particular one musician, Zhenya, like, hey, you want to do this with me? I paint, you play, and she plays violin. And she grabbed to the idea, and there was our first show from a painter. Painters were very private in our practice usually. I shifted to live painting performer, where I would have a large canvas, half of the space or stage, blank canvas, and the other half would be shared with musical acts. And I would draw the inspiration from the notes that I hear, the experimental musical acts, the audience, the environment around. And that is how the Canvas Vibrations was born, because we named the Canvas Vibration with Zhenya. It started as Canvas Vibes, then it graduated to Canvas Vibrations. It was literally catching everything around of the moment through my interpretation or my understanding, the observation, and capturing that moment on canvas. So therefore, each one is a story. Each one is a given story of the moment. Never repeated, never try to be repeated. It really carries that moment of the evening, I suppose, and through that practice, because when I started it, it was very nerve-wracking. I'm a painter, not a performer, or at least that's what I thought. So it took some time and mind shift to meditate while painting. Through nervousness, I would have self-conversations, like, why are you nervous? What is it? So the self-dialogue was a meditational and very important element into those live painting performances. And approach to the live painting performances as very open approach without trying to have a plan or not trying to have a goal. There still took time of preparation. It probably takes me about a couple days to just connect to the imaginary canvas that I would have. That would take hiking or walks on one of my favorite things outside of studio and performances and home is rock hopping, where you jump from one rock to another, and they're different sizes and different shapes, and the water underneath of you, and it requires for you to be in the moment, because once you becoming the water, you becoming the wind, you becoming the rock, because once you're somewhere else, so you're gonna fall, and you're gonna be wet, and you might hurt yourself. And that had been practiced too. There were a few times where I did fall, but it has been my premeditative before performances is go on these rocks to strategize my each step, to be in that moment, how to stay dry, how to go for distance, but also still being present in the moment. That is, and every day, probably the most challenging, I think not only for me, but probably lots of people. We're going from point A to point B, we are planning, and I personally at times find myself very difficult to be in the moment, because you're thinking the next thing, they're picking up your son from school, the next event, the next painting. It's always the next, but how do you combine the next with a moment? And that's the balancing act. So that's the practice to premeditative for their each performance or each painting. And then when I'm in the moment, if I am collaborating or observing the energy all around. So I always start with a blank canvas. And the story goes from that moment to the few hours, and then a painting is alive. But in this between time, it's observing what's around you, but also to unite, to understand, to recognize all, and then harmonize, and aesthetically, visually bring it all together at the end as well. That's the general practice, the process of that. And because I observe so much energy through audience, through collaborations and self, it also takes me about 2 days to recover after. Then I have to go back to the rocks and take that time and find my own background, because I took so much and then I shared so much, and then so that's pretty much the only process of preparation. As a journey of the painting goes, it's always different. It all depends where I am at, what is my thought of the moment, what's the word of the moment, what the world is going through. It is as individual and also very communal and very global. We are energetic beings and we're all connected to one to another. And so for me, it's how to stay universal, how to stay global, how to stay collective, and how to stay together. So this is to bring all of that, the age, the race, all of that, where it's ageless, it's limitless, it's open for so much and interpretation, and that leads me to why I pick and choose abstract expressionism. I find abstract expressionism fascinating because there is no limits. There's literally no limits, and there is so much space to explore and to tell a story in so many ways. And I can tell you about some maybe stories or the moments if I remember of the moment. But for me, as an artist, it's also important for observer to create their own story. When they look at the painting, I think there is enough space and place and colors and shapes and layers and variety of things that each person can create their own story. And I think it's impossible to have one story or one. We all have different upbringings, different happiness, different traumas, different places, different thought processes, different inspirations. So therefore, abstract expressionism, in the way I approach my paintings, I like to think it allows others to create their own story, to use their imagination, allows them to open their imagination. Hopefully they find a personal story that they connect to, but on their own way, without me telling them how to connect to that. And I fell in love with abstract expression. And to me, it's like a fictional book. When you read a fictional book, and I think all fictional books are written on certain research or personal experiences, it gives more space and room for being vulnerable and being honest. And but you can put it under fiction, just in case. Or if it's a history book or biography book, it's just it's a one way and linear way. Truth is a very abstract form. As many humans we are on this earth, that's how much truth there is. Because we're all based and we're all wired from our own individual stories, and one never repeats. And I like to believe that allows, through my paintings and abstract expression is the way I use, for each person to create their own story, their own intake on that. One thing that I choose, or I try to, and to always have the key word, no matter what I'm going through, no matter what I'm painting, no matter the environment I'm in, and no matter of collaboration, I will throw the energy, I will throw the process, and sometimes it'll scare me. Like, where did that come from? Is this me? Or is that the next person next to me? Whose vibration did I pick up? So that's going back to the dialogue through meditative process of a painting of the moment. But to finalize the painting, I have 2 key words that I aim for is love and light. When you operate with love, the harmony comes. Love just is. It doesn't have shapes, doesn't have forms. It doesn't choose, it doesn't pick, no matter of your opinion, no matter how good you are, how bad you are. Love just that. It's the respect and harmony and empathy to an individual next to you, to globally, to approach. So that's my approach to each painting. So then, after throwing some vibrations and energies through the evening of the moment, then I step back and I look at it, how can I bring it all together? I think everything is very relevant and very important, and so therefore each brushstroke represents that, and it changes. Some are more smooth, some are more thrown out there, but at the end, I'd like to harmonize, I like to bring it together. There's aesthetics, and then there's the 2 key elements, words are love and light. So how then, no matter the story of the moment or what story I went through, then this is my finalizing steps of the painting. Sometimes I achieve to make a painting will be just it, and I don't have to take it back to a studio. This is like ideal and perfect. When I managed to capture not only the vibrations, but also aesthetically harmonizing it together. I flip the painting constantly when I paint. For me, it's important for it to make sense from each corner, from each direction, from each side, to capture that harmony. So if you paint, not this particular one, because this one came from a studio, and I'll talk about this approach, but in the live painting performances, I constantly flip them. If we take any of them and flip upside down, it's supposed to have the same visual balance and the same visual harmony and a little different story, and then you have to rewire your mind into reading it differently. And that's how I approach each painting. And so I try, not that it's always a key, but then sometimes after all the process, well, if you look at the title, each title starts with a place of where it was painted. It does not particular, and some collaborations, I don't even know who they are. Some collaborations, so there are events, the canvas vibrations that I organize, finding musicians collaborating. Sometimes I'm invited into already existing space with existing vibration, with existing music, and it's not my pick or choice. And I go along with what I have and what I work with. I do. You're not wrong. I just thought myself maybe a day or 2 ago how, because I do have a place of a space, but maybe keep track of people who were part of that evening or the moment. To push further, there are plans. There are future plans. They are bigger canvases. There are more space, more art, more room, more collaborations in a really larger scales. Different. It doesn't have just to be musical act. For instance, the bossa right now, we're practicing once a month. We have, I do the live painting, canvas vibration, then the spoken word poetry, and then the live music, which constantly a rotation of different musicians. There's not always I can capture of every participant, and it's really not about that either. But there's certain maybe events or performances where, and I do give credit to Zhenya, if that's what your concern or. So that's the live painting performance, and it changes, it varies. I find it interesting for myself. It became a philosophy. It became a practice that I try to apply not only in painting, but also on my everyday life. How the art of letting go. It is a constant chaos. It is a constant mix of, particular, the DMV, DC is a very interesting area that I love. The political, the creative, and everything in between, the international. It's such a mix that I've never experienced the vibrations and energy of that anywhere else. And then we also have parks and lakes and nature that is available, and all of that together. So the art of letting go, okay, there's a couple of things in that practice. Art of letting go, particularly for me, represents how to approach certain situations in your emotional being. You can get upset, you can get angry, you can criticize, or take a different approach. How to be, it's how to always fix your mind into being a better being, into projecting a better energy and self, but with understanding of what's happening. So this is when it becomes a choice. It's a choice and practice on everyday base of how to react to what's happening around in the community, in personal, in the world. It becomes a choice how for instance, in some of my live painting performances, I would, depends on my mood and depends on my day or evening, but I would let audience to participate in my painting. And when that happens, suddenly I give them just one instruction, don't get attached. And that's the practice of letting go. I'm letting you paint on my pre-existing already moment. Therefore, I'm allowing, there's no rules. You can use any color, you can paint anywhere, and therefore I have to observe and watch. Of course, I have some more favorite parts of the painting and some not, and then they will just, they're allowed by my word to, that's part of the practice, to participate on already existing process, but then to understand that I will go back at it and I will keep on pushing it and work more, and most likely, and perhaps or not at all, some will be there, maybe all be there, maybe none of them will be there. So don't get your feelings hurt, don't get attached. You're welcome to participate, but it's a process. And sometimes certain paintings, that collective energy is the palette for me. It's determines the direction of the painting at times. It also helps when you're stuck at the moment, like what's the next color or what's the next. And by someone coming in, and usually they're the ones who are more closely observed and paying attention, or they'll be like, what are you painting? And the question is always you. I literally, you and next person to in that abstract form. I've been pointed out several times when I paint, it's all depends on what I'm wearing, those colors will show up in the painting. I never paid attention, I never knew, but I've been pointed out constantly that whatever comes, so therefore I believe as well the person next to me, some approach with certain being that a color pops up in my head that I use, that they brought, that they inspired me, that I use. Or when they go into, and it's also interesting to watch and observe, it's like anthropology of everybody, different approach to that. Some will put a dot. Some will work around already existing images. There was one time, that's a story I will, it was good practice for me. It was a large painting, it's not here today, it was 4 feet by 4 feet. I was painting at Black Cat. Sonia was there and numerous musicians. Sonia plays violin, she's my partner in joy and a support, and my to-go-to person. I think we do well collaborating together. But right at the end, I spent about 3 or 4 hours painting, capturing the moment. It was also, so I started doing live painting performances in 2018. And at that time, it was a beginning, and I told, right at the end, maybe 10 minutes left, there was one particular person who wanted it, so I explained the process. One particular person wanted to participate, and I said, any color, any brush, anything you want. So he took a large, very deep, bright red. And he picked a brush that thick. And so the art of letting go is observe. And he's also an artist. He's actually a very pretty well-known DMV artist. And he took that brush, and it's a 4 feet by 4 feet, 3-4 hour work into it, and numerous amazing musicians collaborating on that. And he took that brush and he took that red, and he went so, it wasn't even just crossing, it was that dripping, and he put a big red cross. And it was dripping all over, like gooey red. He crossed it in red. It was a really memorable moment because for that split second I wanted to go, wow! But I'm like, wait, it's the art of letting go. It's the practice that I preach. How do I apply it in that moment? And I thought it was so interesting. That not only, it was very, I think for the next 2 weeks, people would come up to me and ask, how did you feel about it? Because everyone went, but as I said, I'm the one who's still gonna go back. And I had 5 minutes left. And that 5 minutes, I repainted the entire painting. It didn't matter what I did for 3 hours. It didn't matter what he did. In 5 minutes, a brand new painting was alive. And that became a story.
Did you get part of the red?
No.
Oh.
Eventually.
I want to see this painting.
So,
You also obliterated all the red?
That painting actually took many stories and many shapes. I ended up, I mean, it was different at the moment. I did ended up taking it to a studio and I worked on it more. And then it completely shifted. And sometimes I don't finish the story. Sometimes I would bring the same canvas, same story to already, sometimes to the same place, but maybe different. And I keep on working on it. I'm like, the story was not over. The story still has things to say. And then I keep on going. There are so many paintings underneath of the painting. It's, if you do the X-ray, there's, and sometimes I'll try to photograph through the process, because for me it's interesting to see where I was, where I am, and where I want to go with that. And there are times I'm like, oh, I liked it then. Like, I wish I had one he kept pushing me. He kept saying, I want that painting. It really took me, I couldn't understand what he meant at first. He's like, I want that painting. He meant 5 steps back. He's like, this is what I want. I'm like, well, it's there. It's there and more and beyond. So for him, it was, for the observer, the audience, he came on a few events and he's like, I think it was challenging for him. I was breaking his boundaries to keep following, like, don't get stuck on that painting. Like, we moved. The moment is gone, now it's different. Now observe it and view it differently. This is where we are now. Yes. And that's audience participation. It's not always the practice, but there are, sometimes it is a practice. Sometimes I'll meditate. So for instance, I have these 2 paintings right here. One is called, remember, one of them is insecurity, and one of them is rejection. So rejection is on top, and insecurity is on the bottom. In general practice of everyday life, there's 2 words, I suppose, scary and negative, or not a fun. Like, nobody likes to be rejected, or it's not fun to be insecure. But through paintings, I learned through process that, so like I was meditating while painting that painting on rejection. What the rejection means to me, what rejection means in the world. And I came to, by the time I finished the painting, I came to conclusion, it's not about me. I was never rejected. We were all in a different vibrations. It was miscommunication of the moment. To either it's a romantic or friends or business. We're just doing our own thing. I was never rejected. We just never seemed to match the same vibration of the moment. So my rejection came into flowers at the end. Like, it's unfortunately that we put too much energy and pressure on each word and certain meaning to the word that doesn't have to carry. Like, you can create your own meaning to that word, to that moment. So I guess the lighter the process, the easier it is for you to coexist in this busy.
So I have a question. Do you have a, within this limitless of impression of abstract, is there a pattern when you pick a color, when you combine a color? Do you follow a particular pattern? Like, I feel this way. So how do you decide which color to mix?
So yes and no. Absolutely yes in the moment. I did go to school. I went to 2 art schools. Right. So I do have idea. I mean, I know color theory, and but it's not necessarily my focus, but I have this intuitively built in what goes together, what doesn't. It already becomes like eating. I don't think about it, but I pick up a color, I put it in the painting. Would I think this will go with the whole? Will it match? Will it bring So even with abstract expressionism, there's still background, middle ground, and front ground. When I start from blank canvas, I'm building the background. I'm building. That's why I think it's interesting to watch the whole process like a live painting performance, because it starts like a bit enchilada here and there, overall color, overall shape, and determining the mood of self and the room. Then the middle ground comes, and then more shapes comes along, more direction. I love accidents, like once the whole entire can of paint fell on my dress. So instead of panicking and being nervous, I just started using this and applying to painting. Like, it's important to go with a flow in my process. The easel broke down, not a problem. Let me take the painting and put it against the wall, lay it down, get on my knees, and just keep on going. And those accidents actually are the most interesting. They become influential and determine journey of a painting.
I love the way you use the leftover paint when you did the zip on paint. I love how you use the leftover paint to finish to count.
Alberto is a friend of many years, so he knows my personal story. Sometimes I do, I guess they call sip and paint. I don't like to call them sip and aid. I like to call them the discovery of abstract and expression, where I would use my philosophy and teach the philosophy, the art of letting go, and individual, try to inspire to create a masterpiece, tell them about accidents, tell them, and it's been humongous joy for me to watch and observe participants to really push themselves. And some would walk out like, I definitely broke my boundaries today. Because it's a general philosophy, but then I individually would like, okay, if you don't know, you woke up today. What's the first thing you saw? What was your first thought? And surprisingly, their colors, we are such an interesting beings, and our subconscious knowledge and observation always present. Most of the participants will end up with colors on their individual paintings, whatever the colors is around. Let's say their exhibit and their paintings, most likely they're gonna have those colors in that painting without even realizing it. There's one girl, lady, she's like pushed and pushed and pushed slowly, very gently. I try her to push more, and then I come a point, she's like, I'm an engineer. This is all the art of letting go I can do. Like, she knew like her mind, how, and it was beautiful, it was different. And everyone would end up with absolutely different, unique painting and like really masterpieces. I would get so impressed and inspired in this process. So that's the live painting performances. So I now also work out the studio. I have a studio in Arlington. Moving into studio space was completely different approach to paintings. I think I sat there for 2 weeks at first, not knowing what to do, because I'm so used to on-the-go studio, the venues, the places, the collaborations has been my studio that I created. Like DMV was my studio. I made this to be my performance, my studio space, my inspiration, everything. To be in a studio, I was missing the audience. I was missing the crowd. I was missing the noise, because I knew how to tune into everything, but also block when needed by meditating and tuning into painting, how to proceed this into painting. So coming into studio, having that time and self was took me time to rewire and adjust to it. And then it became more learnable. Because now you don't have everyone to inspire to participate. This is just you. And this is where this came from, this painting. It was not even meant to be in this exhibit. It was born just a few weeks before it moved here, but it's a very personal, and the process, sometimes I dance, sometimes I sit, sometimes I paint, sometimes I just look at myself in the mirror for a development practice. So I am me, what am I? And I'm going back to conscious and subconscious knowledge. Sometimes like you meditate while you're painting. Well, that particular one was interesting for myself to observe myself and approaching it. I think for 2 weeks I just sat in front of that blank canvas. I stretched it, I hugged it first. I'm like, okay. I wrapped it around me, I felt it. I like, okay, let's talk. And then I stretched it. Then I primed it to that orange one, as you can tell. This is that color. It's more yellow in the video. And then I sat in front of that for 2 weeks every single day. I didn't know how to approach it. The size was intimidating. Cell was intimidating. Like, what do I tell? What is it? And then after 2 weeks looking at it and looking at it for hours and hours and hours, it just went. And I think it was within 3-4 days, because of the size, like it was 3 full nights of just running around, working, without then thinking about it. Like that's how tune in and meditate if I get into it. And then I stopped. And then I sat and looked at it for 3 more weeks. And then I looked and I looked and I looked. And then I found so many stories in that, like I see tribal. So I don't know, depends on what you believe. I'm like, past lives, whatever. Maybe that is my story. Maybe it's me in the future. So the imagination can take you. You can find your own truth, find your own story. I found musical instruments. I find the tribes. I find the community. There's like that little, like, what is that? Is that a child? Is it a woman running? It's a fire. I see a baby. And then this. So it started with that. It was actually the outline of myself. I suppose with wings, because that's a practice I use to work the top of my body. And then it came to the end to be actually that blank. And then because you're working, and I was thinking, do I have to keep on working? Do I need to fill this space? And then, no, this is the void. This is the void that everyone can fill in. It doesn't have to be filled. It can be as is. So, and it came to be that storytelling with that particular empty space right in the middle and so much story behind. And then I look through the process, and there's like you said, that you can see that's a different painting right there. And then each color creates new story. So it's the layers and layers that is background, middle ground, and then we're going into front ground. Then after, in both processes, live painting performances or studio, it's aesthetics. Do we have enough balance? Do we have enough harmony? Is there enough light? Is there enough dark? Is there everything? What comes up? What goes back? What pushes it? And how to balance it and harmonize it? And so this was out of the studio. The 3 top ones over there were my first studio space, paintings as well. But the rest were came from live painting performances.
I have a question. I saw you live paint on Sunday.
At Flash?
Yeah, at Flash, and it was really, I was very mesmerized by it because I felt like you were working. It was very fluid and very natural. It was before I even knew the whole thing. It's art of letting go. I was my first exposure. It was cool because you were doing it all in totality. It's not. I never saw you work in details. You would work in details in a bigger picture. It was always smaller to bigger, smaller to bigger. It was never just one thing. And I was curious because you were speaking of accidents. Now, when these accidents happened, these are always kind of external factors, you know? It's like the paint fell on you by accident. It's things that you didn't really have control. But did you ever feel that you make mistakes or accidents in your control? Like you do a wrong stroke and you're like, ooh, I didn't like that detail.
Yes and no. Sure, there's not always like, but one always factor to that, you don't like the story, what do? You change it. Even if that did happen, the next minute you have another color, another brush, another moment. You're like, even if I did not like it, I can change it. I can make it in the way I want. I can tell a story in the way I want. It is my dialogue, it is my story. Even if it doesn't float of the moment, you don't like story, you change it. So that is not a stressful point. It's actually a fun process to go through all the, that also happens part of that doesn't look that way, or I thought it would do this, but it didn't, and then you just change.
But do you change the whole story or do you just change that sentence?
You change the whole story constantly, because what is the whole story? The whole story is layers and layers and layers and layers. If that was hanging here for the rest of my life, and I approached it every single day for the rest of my life, constant change of story. Even just one brush stroke, it already changes the story. So layers and layers and layers creates a deeper dialogue, maybe. And thank you for saying this and observing it. It always, it's like hugging my heart to take time to observe, to be there, and to pay attention. Thank you.
I had a question, if I'm talking into this talking state. Given the dynamic nature of your work, how do you know when you're done on a particular work?
It's a good question. I ask myself that a lot too. Most of that is intuitive. Like I said, I think I can work and work and work and never stop because it will change and shift the story. But it's catching the moment. So I try, first of all, not to overthink and to create that moment of the moment. So once I take the painting back to studio, the environment has changed, the energy has changed. So I try to approach the painting within the next few days, max a week, try. So I can still vibrate on the same vibrations and energy that I just observed and finish it up. Because once I move on, because life keeps going, so I try to that to be that moment, and therefore a story, and then well, I guess I told myself you have to stop somewhere. So it's intuitive, but how do you, but it allow me to paint in that for the rest of my life. I will never stop, and there's never gonna be the ending. I suppose if you put them chronologically, it's never-ending story. It just takes different parts and the different canvases, and yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think music kind of gives you, I don't know, a background maybe. Like this, the violin, when Zhenya plays the violin, what is music? How do you relate to that music? For example, I love when we go to Bosa. I love that the group, they don't, I mean, obviously they've been together, but the tune they play, they try to match the moment. sometimes they play jazz, and they each, you have the bassist, you have the guy playing the drum, and they just improvise based on the moment. Sometimes they come up with music, a well-known jazz tune, sometimes they come up with, and I pay laser-focused attention to what each participant, how each participant view her painting. So I take a video, and I see how they interpret that one. Should I go this way? And then I look at the basic, how they interpret, and as she goes painting, how do you see that? So it's a big relationship.
Everything gives me energy. I'm not limited to just music. It is part of the practice. It's the first thing and first available thing, but everything is energy. I was just telling about the hikes and the rocks and hopping and being and strategizing your path and journey and how not to fall and how to stay dry, like everything. It's literally everything. It's you, it's you, it's you, it's the loved ones, my son, yeah. But music is something easy for others as well to see when I paint and hear. And I think it creates interesting, you're visually watching, you're listening as well. And so to have it all in one space on a regular given day, how cool is that?
Well, I got to know you when you worked at IOTA, and I had no idea you were an artist. And I just loved your spirit because you were always there. You loved me, obviously. You
That's
loved
why I
the
met you.
music. And, you know, and then I started to get to know you and discovered you were an artist, and I just wanted to say, love the connection.
And Sumin also has a painting of mine.
I'm going to ask you a little bit more. I always find it extraordinary, having lived here, having been born here, lived in this city my whole life, folks that have a life story like yours, where you started in Russia, it sounds like you stayed there through your teenage years, then moved to Kansas, which, believe me, Kansas is as novel idea to me as it was probably to you, and then here. And I think that requires an enormous amount of resilience and adaptability, but there also must be that also must generate or may generate a certain anxiety. Do you think your work expresses or releases some of that, if that exists?
For sure, it is definitely therapeutical. But I also done all this journey when I was a bit younger. When you're younger, it less fears. You're excited. I was always intrigued and excited with just journey. And I also try to count the blessings. Like now I have 3 homes, the Russia, the Kansas, the DMV, and being, painting's definitely, it's a therapy as well. And that is kind of exactly almost.
Do you find in looking at your work, some of it that you know is an energy that emanates, that some of it is resonant of your I don't know where you were from in Russia. Where were you from in Russia?
City called Voronezh.
Does some of your work evoke what must be embedded in your background experience?
Maybe, but I don't. It's not in my focus or practice. I also, part of studio time or self-time or dialogue of self, I also try to not, try to break. So 2 years ago, I invested in myself a lot, into Kundalini yoga, in practices, in art, in business, and I entered my birthday with I'm here to learn. And that required to break everything or get rid of everything what I thought I knew. And that comes with roots, and that comes with yesterday, and it comes with simple, even words that we already have preconditioned meaning to them. So everything had to go, everything, breaking, and still, I mean, it's a process. How to reshape, to relearn, to create your own story, to create your own journey. I think it's a philosophy, it's a practice that works for me, and the practice that I will always share with others, how healing element we all can relate to. And no matter where you're from, no matter who you are and what, there's always emotional elements that we all share, less or more, with individual story. But the base of good and bad and happy and pain and all that, we all experienced it. So how to take all this and rewrite the story at times. So is it part of me, my background? Of course. My Soviet grandmother lives with me. I still get that culture, I still get that love, and it has its own poetic story about it.